All right. So it's recording now. So we're going to be doing hip focus, a little bit of knee stuff that affects basically your knees. That can be from your hips, low back, that type of stuff today. Super simple and stuff that you guys can all feel comfortable or have seen before, but maybe some little tips or tricks about those moves, little added movements or techniques that you might like of stuff that you've probably already done before. So to start with, hopefully you guys will be able to see me. You're going to stand up. We're going to get our knees and everything warm through just a basic pattern, because I like to do stuff warm and dynamic and not just static stretching. So starting out, we've done this before. You can do it with a little bit of space between your legs. You can also do it together. I do it with a little space so that I get a little bit of ankle excess mobility through it, but you can always do it together if it just coordination-wise makes sense, or literally just going back and forth into the circles. Like I said, I'll end up moving mine a little wider, so I still get it through the hips, but I get almost a little extra roll and foot in there. You guys can choose. Seems really simple. Seems like some like 70s like hand jive dance move, but really thinking about hitting every range of motion, leaning forward, rocking in through, trying to like almost feel like the cricks and creaks and everything that you'd feel in your joints. Let's go 3 more. Seems really simple. You'll start to like my feet are starting to turn with it, whatever. Just go with it. There's no right or wrong. And then next you're going to actually take it. We're going to go through pattern. So this one's the one that's weird. We've done it before where we did it with like our shoulders all the way up and around. You're trying to hit every range of that joint. So instead of doing like a hip swing, which we'll do in a second, you're actually going to do what's called like a hip figure 8. If you need to, you can always like hold onto a wall to do it, right? So that you can really focus on what you're doing here. So you're going in with the foot, slight bend. You should feel a little pull in the hip. I'm not taking my whole pelvis with it. I'm trying to do it just through the hip, locally rotating in, and then I'm going out, and then I'm trying to locally rotate out and externally with my hip, and then going back, and then diving back in. So it's kind of funky, but we're being extra picky about making it about the hip. So you want to feel like you're almost doing, it's called a figure 8 for the hip, right? But you're getting some knee, you'll get some ankle, your foot's turning in and out. So you can see if you look up close when I'm doing it, my foot is going like this through the range of motion. I'm not just moving the hip. I'm actually doing like a full fascial turn throughout all of it. And I'm trying to go kind of backwards with it and forwards with it. Go ahead and stop that direction and go back the other way. So this way was the way first. Now lead with your heel. It's going to feel weird. You might not be able to do it, and that's fine, but just playing around with it and trying to go the other way, it's a cool challenge. And the leg you're standing on might also start to get tired. This is why I love this one, because it's forcing you to feel fatigue and stand in a position, and it's getting the stuff that we're about to stretch out loose too and warm. Go ahead and stop, shake it out a little. That's going to be your standing leg now. Same deal. So again, you can change where you're holding if you need to hold on to something. If you want to challenge yourself and do it freestanding, that's fine too. But if doing it freestanding, you turn it into just this big global swinging move, you're kind of defeating the purpose of really making this as a range of motion movement. So again, I'm playing around. If you looked close, my feet are actually dipping and toes are bending and then curling as I do it, as I go through that figure 8 position. So it's almost like I'm trying to like scoop sand around into a figure 8 as I go through it. And I'm trying to make it a lot about the hip and the locally turning at the hip. I even get a little bit of click clacks in my hip girdle sometimes, and that's totally fine. That's just where my body is. Good. And then this is the weird part, switch directions. So now it's like you're leading with your heel and almost like scooping sand forward with your heel. So this one is part of, I believe it's functional range release, could be part of like an FMSA, there we go, which is just different functional mobility type protocols that we use with like patterns of training, but also with rehab and with clinical stuff. Good, go ahead and rest, shake it all out. That's just about playing off of like the fascial slings, fascial movements, as to the tension in your body. Okay, so from here, it's my favorite one. I do this all the time. I want to go into some Jefferson curls real quick. You just use the hip Now I want to do the stuff where we get all the little tiny things firing also in the low back. So these guys, I make you guys do these all the time. You can go to a bit of a deficit. Slight bend in the knees, fine. You don't want to feel like you're straining your hamstring, and back up. You're going to go through 10 of them on your own. You've all done these ones with me before, but really think about rolling down one vertebrae at a time and rolling up one vertebrae at a time. I think that's 3 for me. Get as much or as little of a stretch as you want. I'm just using this one to get all the little muscles heated, right? All the range of motion, the end range that we're able to accomplish through movement, not through stretching, right? So we're starting with that. We're starting with what mobility, what range of motion can you attain using your own muscles versus overpressure. So we're just trying to get all those little guys heated up. I think that's like 5 or 6 for me. I'm not doing the best job of counting. Keep going through it. You can even add, like if you guys want to at the top, you can add like a reach in, up and over, whatever you want to do. I just adjusted my clavicle. That was great. So whatever you need, whatever you're tight. There's no right or wrong. We're just spending time during mobility doing this and giving you guys different ideas of stuff to do. All right, that's close enough to 10 for me. I'm sure you guys are pretty close with it. So the next move that we're gonna do, now that we got that little bit of like that local swivel, right? So we have our tibia, which is the big bone that goes up into our knee. It goes in and out. It's not super big through motion. Most of this motion I'm doing right now is from my calf. It goes in and out, right, in general. So what I want to do is I want to play around with, because this is a hinge joint. Our knee is a hinge joint, right? So it just kind of opens and closes, and it can turn and swivel a little, but not a lot. Problem is when our hip isn't doing all the motion it should, it tries to force our knee to not just hinge. It tries to have our knee swivel or turn more than it should, and that joint isn't designed to do that. Then we can get pain, right? Because it's not taking the force in the way it's designed. So something that I like to do is making sure that we're getting that little bit of motion through here. So I'll tend to go into, basically, we're going to be going into one of these stretches, okay? But what I want to do and what I try to play with is I turn my foot in. So from the front, I'm trying to see what looks best for you guys to see. Maybe like right in that angle. Is that good? Can you see someone shake their head so I get some feedback? Perfect. Okay, so from here, doing it where you kind of turn your foot in, your foot's still planted, you're not like rolled, right? Turn your foot in, doesn't have to be huge. I then assist and kind of roll through that with my hand. And then with my hip, I drive out into a normal range of motion and just rock back and forth into that range. So I'm not bringing my foot up or down. I'm just trying to go straight forward, back and forth, but yet my foot is kind of almost pigeon-toed in, right? And it takes that little bit of range. You might be like, I feel like this is doing nothing. I just can't go very far. That's fine, right? We're playing with mobility that we don't always know we do or don't use. Good. After you're doing like 5+ of those ones, go and turn your foot the other way. Knee in. Now again, you wouldn't want to load this. We're not doing like a big heavy load. We're just doing some mobility. And now I'm going to go and torque through the tissues. Again, I'm taking the tissue with me. Am I really turning the bone much? Probably not. My body already turned it probably wherever it can go to, and it stopped there. When I take the tissues to go with it and then go forward, so if I were to stagger a little bit so you guys can see the angle that I got going here, I'm going forward in a way that like we wouldn't want to squat. You don't want your knee going that way while your foot's going that way. But what we're doing through this is a mobility of taking the tissue, going with the angle of the foot, and then driving the knee through the hinge it would normally do. Mainly, we're doing this to put it in the end ranges of where we don't necessarily want it to pull on our knee from, but letting it get used to it. So I know that's funky. Thanks for playing. Go to the other side. Okay, so again, I'm only in like this kind of a position. I'm not super long stretched out. I'm just playing around with a little bit of local pull and torque on the knee. So from here, I turn my foot in. Okay, so from this angle, it's a bit of a pigeon toe. I go with that torque. Again, this is taking my tissues with me. It's not doing a ton to change the bone. And then I'm going forward and backwards. So I'm not swiveling in to go with the foot, right? I'm just going forward into where it feels like it's going to stop. Shouldn't hurt, shouldn't be going super far. You probably notice that you can only go so far because our bones weren't designed to necessarily track that way under load, right? But we're trying to loosen through any of that tension. Let's do 3 more. This is a really good one too before you're gonna go run. And let's go ahead and turn that foot out. So now, again, if you're looking square, it's almost like I'm duck-footed. And then I'm gonna turn and torque the tissue towards that duck-footedness, but then I still bring the knee forward. Again, not a position you'd wanna load, but we're just kind of flossing, sliding, and gliding nerves, tissue, fascia, all that jazz, and just giving our body input as to what positions and ranges of motions feel right versus off, versus just a normal power versus no power in that tracking pattern. It's just input to your body. It's great before running, because when we run, we do a bunch of repetition of small little rotations in our knee every time we impact, right? And rotations in our feet every time we land and then take back off again with that foot. Cool. Okay, now that we did that one, super simple proprioception stuff, we're just gonna go into a basic runner's lunge. Now, it should feel like real good to you, right? You can kind of rock around, feels like it's really easy to go in range of motion, right? You can make this a longer one, work on squaring your hips, but your ankles and knees shouldn't feel like they're pinching, pulling, whatever. It should automatically kind of feel like it wants to go in its ideal pattern. It's like, I want to go this way, the one way you haven't taken me yet. This is the most comfortable, right? And then I can work towards rocking my hip down, right? This is the part where you might want something under your knee, but something else you can use, they talk about in a lot of yoga practices, is thinking about when you're down, pulling the knee forward a little bit. And what it does is when you kind of have that tension and then you pull forward on it, you roll forward, it basically tractions your kneecap back, so you're not right on it digging into the ground. So that might be another little way, instead of being directly on it, is actually kind of like almost pulling this hip towards, if you can see that small movement in my leg, it rolls me off the edge of my kneecap so that I'm in a cushier part that might feel more comfortable to you. So that's something else to play around with. And then you can even bring your leg up. If you're super flexible, you can maybe grab your leg, whatever you want to do, but just making sure that while you're doing all of that, you're being nice and good tracking with a full flat foot, and you can play around with what the knee and the front's doing. Go ahead and switch sides. Same deal. So again, this can be a longer stretch. You can really lean into it. You can drop that hip down, coming in and out of it. Can be really nice. Staying square, but then going around with the knee while the foot stays flat. Again, you should feel primed and able to do that without any pain from the stuff we already did already. You can also, like I said, kind of pull that leg traction towards you, rolling up off the kneecap, but you're still pushed into the ground so that it's comfortable enough to maybe bring that foot up, right? So here, I traction forward a little bit with my hip, rolls me onto a comfortable spot of my knee, and then bring the foot up. You can stretch there, you can grab it and pull it up, whatever you want to do. Up to you guys. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so to do whatever you maybe haven't done yet, whether it be dropping through the hips, squeezing the butt, pulling up the leg, whatever you want to do. Maybe it's just playing around with the ankle in the front. That's fine. And then let's go ahead, just because it feels nice, let's just drop down into the half pigeon, or might just be called pigeon. I don't actually know because I don't do yoga, but this one, okay, some of you are able to get your leg all the way out here. Some of you, that's going to really torque on your knee. That can torque on your meniscus, any of that stuff. So bring it back in neutral. That's fine. So that might look like this, right? Big goal is thinking about dropping that hip down. If you need to, and you're someone that in doing this, it's really painful or a big stretch here, put that towel or that wedge of something underneath and sit on it. That's fine if you can't get all the way towards the ground, or if you're not comfortable being in a tensioned hip like this. That's fine. If this hurts your knees, let me know, okay? Because that could be something else going on entirely. Or it could be an angle you got going on with your foot. I'm hoping that after you guys already did that little bit of torsion through this, when we worked at it at the beginning with adding tension, that this doesn't feel really uncomfortable in your knee at all. Should feel pretty easy to do. Go ahead and switch sides. Again, same deal, because you'll notice my femur's going this way and my foot is kind of sunk into the side, rotated into the side. That's rotating at that tibia, that knee joint we talked about at the beginning. That's what those little tiny movements allow us to do, is to not necessarily be directly on our foot, but rotate inward. It also just allows our foot to, or our leg to lock out versus bend, okay? So playing around with those as you heat up, you can start to like pull the leg out, bring the knee up a little bit, the foot up a little bit, depending on what you're capable of, right? Sinking more through here. You can even, if you're super flexy and you were loving it before, from the pigeon, you can reach back and grab and pull and get a little quad, right? Just be careful, be mindful. You can hold on to something to sit upright, really sink down and around, okay? And just do whatever floats your boat. Again, some of these, like I said, are ones we've all done before. I'm just basically putting them in here as accountability so you guys spend time doing it. And if you learn a little tip or trick you didn't know about, fantastic, right? Okay, let's go ahead and bring it back to center, sitting down. This one, what we're gonna do is the hip swivel is what it's referred to a lot. It's something that I've thrown in with you guys before as part of the shin box rotation, okay? So the shin boxes that we've done before are these guys, right? And you're coming up here and all that jazz. What we're gonna do is do the hip swivel where you're starting in that same position and then trying to keep your feet on the ground. You're gonna swivel, so you're like this, and then back. So you'll notice if you watch even just this knee that I have on screen right now, if you watch what it's requiring, this foot turned out, knee turned in, looks a lot like when I was first doing that rotational stretch at the beginning. And then now as I swivel, boom, now my knee is on the outside of the foot. It's an internal rotation, and it allows me to go here into that end range, right? So the way that the hip swivel works is taking us through internal and external rotation of our hips, but it's also affecting that part of our knee because our knee takes that distant brunt. So go back and forth on these ones, play around with it. Challenge yourself to see if you need to, maybe when you're doing this one, maybe you're not able to keep both feet down. Maybe for you, if you slide your feet out a little bit, you can do it out like this. And maybe they don't get all the way to the ground. And that's fine. Maybe your feet are out wider. What I encourage you to do is keep the feet on the ground though, even if they're further out in front of you. Doing this is fine, right? It's one way to learn it. It might be the furthest modifier. Keep going, by the way, as I'm talking. You guys are doing great. But doing this allows you to not have to use your hips to roll through all the way down to the knee to get that coordinated internal rotation and external rotation that goes in a chain down your leg. So work on, maybe it's further out. Maybe you're not going or rotating as far. Maybe my knees aren't even touching, but then you work on your swivel from here, right? Okay, now because it's you guys, the people that are on right now, take that hip swivel. Ryan's already doing it, which I love, and add in part of that shin box. So you can come up into it, you can sink in, you can sink out, whatever you want to do with that. And then practice on your way down. Control setting that leg down, because in order to do that, do you recognize that figure 8 hip swivel I had you warm up with? Is that part right there, right? To sit back under coordinated control and then back down. Then I can swivel. And then again, up into that kind of stretch, and then that coordinated figure 8, leg going down, back to the swivel. So play with a couple of those. Let's do 5 each side. So start counting. If you've already done a couple each side, do 3 more each side. So going up, bring that leg up and off the ground and out in front of you. So add that next step. Ryan, for example, add that next step of not just here, controlled balance and hip swivel to bring that leg out without a feeling of falling. So it's the back leg coming forward and then having to control go back down. You having fun with that one, Zeke? Love it. Yep. You're using that hip swivel. You're using that kind of figure 8 we did at the beginning to bring it all the way out without sitting back on the foot. Nice. I just love watching this. I'm going to take a look at Alona here. Keep going, Alona. Yeah, so your goal is to try to do it slow and controlled, right? So you're getting all those positions. We know, Alona, you're super flexy. We're working stability for you, right? So this one's a great one that you can get to the position, but try to do it as slow-mo as you can. That involves a lot of coordinated control. So that's going to be your goal. If you're someone who knows you're flexible, don't understand why people have an issue, like, I can sit like this all day. I can swivel all day, no problem. What's the big deal? But then you go to do this and it's okay, and okay, let me drop really quick. That's a stability and a strength that you might lack in your flexibility. So work towards slow, controlled movements.
It's really, really hard for me to do these movements, actually.
Yeah, right? But you're one of the most flexible people we know from the gym. This is why I'm not picking on you, but pointing it out, because a lot of people see how bendy you are, and you do such a great job on other things. So it's great to hear that even this challenges you, because it's not all about flexibility, right? Mobility is also the ability to be strong and stable in those positions. So finish it out, guys. Should be finishing out last couple times on each side. Controlling it, trying to do it as balanced and slow as possible. This is great for anyone watching from home is going to be able to see some of this stuff move and how slow and controlled and fluid. Of course, Angie, being a dancer, could probably tell you that it's not just about being bendy, it's about control. With the amount of dance abs she's been making us do, you need to be strong and coordinated in your flexibility in order for something to actually look fluid and under control. And we want that for all of our lifting. Awesome. Go ahead and wrap that up, guys. And then we're going to do one more awesome one that I really like that takes what you just did, mobile mobility. Everything else is going through dynamic. You move the whole time. Now we're going to have you do it, which I'm a perfect candidate of someone who's not the best at it, and I might end up rotating out of the one. If you need to, you can go up against a wall, but your goal is to kind of be in a squat position. You'll see, for example, Alona does this sometimes when she gets bottomed out in her clean catch, that she goes into this kneeling kind of walkout position. And while we don't want you to do this in Olympic lifting, if you can practice this really strong dynamic of doing that internal and external rotation of the hip, again, don't hurt yourself, really try and push out on those legs, but going through that, we're gonna do it in a couple sets of 10. So do 5 per side and then rest. Let's do it 3 times. And I'm gonna watch what you guys got going. And it's not just turning your hip and turning to an angle, it's about dropping that leg in that same swiveled position, right? So some of us might have to almost turn and drop the hip like this. So Ryan would be an example of that if people are watching this from home. That's not wrong. That's just maybe where instead of this, where his hip can stay square, he's so tight he has to turn his whole pelvis to get some of that. Still a challenge for him, right? But he's not actually able to try and stay square in the pelvis and drop through the hip. And that's where he's going to challenge himself and see if he can make that work. And he's able to do it more, if those of you are watching at home, on, let's see if he's facing me, his right side. If you're looking at it, it looks like his right side. He's actually able to drop and stay more square and move faster. And he probably feels it too, that it feels tighter and harder to do that and to stay forward when he does it with his left. So just little things to notice about yourself. Go ahead and take a rest once you're done with that. And then we don't have to do it together. We can answer questions now, but I still challenge you to do that 2 more times today, 2 more sets of 10. We don't have to sit and watch everyone do that as your challenge. Now, some of you might have found that this was actually easier than doing the hip swivel and the slow motion return out of the shin boxes, but likely it's because doing a squat forces you to engage more big muscle groups that you're used to using. So your body gets a sense of, I'm more turned on, I'm more stable, my muscles are firing because they're higher demand, so I guess I will let you move into this mobility. But then when it was just free floating, kind of no load, just trying to balance and move, our body's like, oh, 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 right? So you might have found that that was harder because we didn't put any weight on you. But I bet if you took a backpack and put it on and made yourself move up and out, you would move with more brace and more intention, and your body would actually allow you to do that movement better. So that's just things to think about, that when we're braced, when we demand ourselves to do something of higher load, we tend to accomplish it sometimes easier because our body actually forces us to brace, or we couldn't accomplish it. We can't cheat our way out of it. But then in regular day-to-day movements or things that don't involve, you know, heavy load or heavy bracing, our body gets away with cheating, right? So if you think about people that throw their back out or something, most of you, even if you've had this experience, it probably wasn't doing your max rep deadlift, your max weight. It was like reaching down to tie a shoe or shaving your leg or bending down to pick up LaToya, right? It was something that your body didn't really think to brace and use all that it had available by default because the demand wasn't there. So just thinking about ways to, like, in the future, apply to your CrossFit practice and everything else. Add load. Once you get good at a certain mobility move, add load, add weight, add bracing, add holding. Do something that challenges the end of those moves to make it harder for you, and test whether or not you've fully accomplished that task or whether you've been compensating the whole time. Are there any questions or things? Any ideas, any comments, concerns for today's?
I have a question going way back to when you were doing this, like toe turn, and then you're moving basically the skin and like sort of the bone right here. Are you going towards your foot, or are you going away from it at this point?
Yeah, so basically if this is your femur, pretend my foot's down here. This is your, femur. This is your tibia, your big shin bone. And this is your quad, big leg bone, which is your femur, right? If they meet together at the knee, so this is a side profile view of the knee, right? This can turn ever so slightly in and out based on whether we're locking our knee straight or unlocking it, right? So what you're practicing by doing this is basically over exaggerating a little bit of a turn with it. So it's gonna match whichever direction your foot goes. So if your foot is going this way, if this is attached to my foot, it's gonna turn it inward like that. So I'm gonna basically take it and over exaggerate that turn as my foot goes that way. And then I can try and like track through the hips straight. And then if my foot goes out, I turn out with it, because that's what's gonna get me the biggest range out, is by having every joint turn the way that I'm trying to go. So, and again, it's a great question as far as which direction. So if the foot's going in, you're taking the tibia and the stretch and the fascia in with it and holding it there while you move through. Because it's just trying to slide and glide and move the tissue, because a lot of times we think about our bones and our joints and we forget that our tissue and our muscles actually hold all that stuff in place too and can stop it from moving, just as much as the bones themselves can stop us from moving if they're not in a good alignment. But we tend to focus on stretching instead of maybe just kind of going with or helping it move in the pattern we want it to feel and learn and copy, right? So you're trying to basically over exaggerate that twist and torque so the input on your nerves can say, hey, this is the direction and the pattern that we feel pull, and we want to go with that. So if your foot's torquing in, you're turning in. If your foot's torquing out, you're turning out. Just again, to over exaggerate. You're not going to load yourself with that heavier than just rocking through it. You're not going to like put heavy weight on there necessarily, but you're just doing it to try and get everything from the tissue down to the bone all moving in the same coordinated feel. Cool? Because it's such a small movement. Like, it's at the bone level, it's like this. It's minimal twisting because it's meant to just be a hinge joint, right? But that little twist has to happen for it to actually come together. Because if you look, especially as a female, if you look at me, my hinge isn't perfectly like 90 degrees straight up and down, right? My hips go in like this and then it hinges. So it's already on a kilter, right? It's just a little bit offset with the way our knees work because we don't walk like this. So that little bit of twist is just to kind of offset that angle that's natural from our hips down to where our feet are. Cool. And again, it won't feel like you're doing much. It doesn't feel like all of a sudden you're getting all this extra range of motion while you go forward, right? Zeke, you're doing it right now. But you're basically over exaggerating to your body input on what the torque and twist could feel like. That's it. Super simple. Any other questions or things you guys noticed? Just checking. All right, guys. So I suggest now that you got a little bit of a rest, I would go through those squatted rotations again into internal rotation, back and forth, trying to stay as square as you can. Again, don't do it past the range of motion that might torque on you. And then I'd test out a couple of shin boxes and hip swivels again after, and you might find that all of a sudden you're more stable doing them. Cool? All right, guys, have fun with it. I'm going to end the recording now. This way people don't have to sit and watch you play around with it. But I encourage you to spend another 10 minutes or so playing with those to get your most out of your mobility today, and thinking about what it is you're using to get the mobility, what joints are actually in play, instead of just doing what feels like it's the easiest to accomplish. All right, I will chat with you all later. Stop that recording.